Hello, I'm Kelly McGowan, Field Specialist in Horticulture for University of Missouri Extension. And today I have with me Shon Bishop from Bishop's Gardens in Cassville, Missouri. And we're going to be talking about tomato grafting today. And we started research on grafted tomatoes in 2021 by comparing yields of grafted versus ungrafted plants in a field versus high tunnel setting at our Southwest Research Center in Mount Vernon. We have since expanded on that, and we are now researching on-farm production of grafted tomatoes. And the reason that we tried this is because grafted tomatoes are often a valuable asset to some of our farmers. They help to overcome disease situations in the soil, and you can also have increased yields as well. Well, Shon, as a farmer with high tunnels, what got you interested in grafted plants? And then what are some of the challenges that you've had, with this project?
Sure. So first and foremost, what we saw was that sort of across the board, yes, grafted plants do make a difference, but it doesn't really make a difference unless you can get them. And so some of the challenges we had with that first particular experience in 2021, we ordered grafted tomatoes and we were using it sort of a national distributor for them, and they couldn't get it to us through the mail for various reasons. And one particular order actually was canceled altogether. And so that sort of led into what we're doing here on farm. Is there any way that we could look at maybe stabilizing or bringing in a more resilient infrastructure in terms of availability for grafted plants for small farmers across the southern part of the state of Missouri? And so that really was the catalyst that sort of moved us through, hey, what if we brought this home? What if we tried it here? And what if we just sold it locally to farmers that want it? We won't have to worry about shipping or any of the issues that we seem to see there logistically. And so we did. We wrote a grant and it was awarded, and we've began to work on that 2 years ago now. And we have learned a lot in the meantime. Some of the challenges, and there are many, I think the first thing is that when you go onto the interwebs and you search YouTube and you read everybody's bulletin, everybody focuses specifically on one particular time, and that is making the actual cut for your grafted plants. Well, with vegetables, that's one of the easiest parts. Really, in terms of success, what we've found is there's two critical areas. It is right after seed propagation, it's managing growth rates between the rootstock and the scion, and then even within the same batch of seeds of scions or rootstocks. And so you would have, say, a 50-cell insert full of maxifort rootstock. Well, a quarter of those could be 50% larger than the other 75% of that flat, and if that makes sense. So you have 20 of them that would have the fourth or fifth true leaf out, where the front part, the 30 of that flat in the front, would only have the first 2 true leaves out. And that matters because diameter matters when you're matching up the scion, the top of the plant, to the rootstock, the bottom of the plant. They need to be relatively similar in size. On the back end, what we found was the management of the healing chambers themselves. So you're going through roughly a 7 to 10 day healing cycle is what we've seen. The first part of that, so the first 5 or 6 days, you have as high as that humidity can go in the chamber, and you have light reduced. And so we cover our chambers with shade cloth. And then as you reach the end of that 5-day, that 6-day stage, you begin to turn down the humidity in that healing chamber. And eventually the last 2 or 3 days, you actually begin to expose the plants to the environment as such, and it's lower humidity outside than it is inside. Well, at first, they're not going to be happy. And it takes sometimes 2 or 3 days of trying to acclimate them so that your plants are going to be okay to go ahead and open that tent up fully and expose them to that. And if you're not there to check on these plants, quite often during that time, you can lose an entire flat or an entire chamber full of plants relatively quickly. And so some of the challenges, it's really the upfront cost for starting, and then it's the time that you're putting into it. Many of us that have small farms have off-farm jobs. And there's some pretty critical pieces that we can get into later on where you need to be present. You need to pay attention, or you can lose things really quickly. When you're talking about specialty crop production, specifically in the Midwest and in the state of Missouri, what you'll find is that tomatoes are always up there. There's a lot of people growing tomatoes. So what happens necessarily then if a large portion of your income is determined upon one crop, is you plant a lot of it, and eventually you'll start to plant it in the same spot, specifically in high tunnel production, unless you have a movable tunnel or you have a rotation in mind. You can run into some problems relatively quickly in terms of planting the same crop in the same place season after season. What a grafted tomato can actually do for us is you can put it in less than ideal soil conditions, and it can bump that marketable yield up by as much as 50%. 30% is really what we've sort of hit in terms of people calling back and saying, no, week over week, it was 30% more using these grafted tomatoes than what I have with ungrafted. So what happens is you have a rootstock. That's what goes into the dirt. That's the thing that really helps us to move past some things that might not be ideal in terms of soil conditioned in our tunnels. And that rootstock is really good at mining the nutrients, really good at managing water, and it grows. It's very vigorous with what it provides for the scion, which is the top of the plant. The scion is whatever it is that you like to grow. And so whether that's Cherokee purples or big beef or Carolina gold or whatever it is that you have, that particular variety of tomato can go right back in the same tunnel that you have been growing or that same field that you've been growing, but it's going to be on top of that maxi fort, which is what makes the difference. And those two things combined can give us, again, quite a bit of marketable yield, a bump in that, and you'll have less issues. We've seen less issues with disease. We've seen less issues with insect problems. And so you're spraying less, you're applying less product to that particular crop, and that helps us on the back end to be more profitable as we go along.
Right, so it's basically a way that we can manage diseases without having to spray or use some kind of chemicals. And there are also different types of rootstocks available for different types of issues.
Sure.
So there's several different issues that can be overcome by using these rootstocks and these grafted plants.
Sure, absolutely.
So another benefit of using grafted tomato plants is season extension. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And we understand that sort of not in the traditional sense of you put up a high tunnel or a season extension structure, but we talked about some of the challenges, some of the good things. With traditional indeterminates, what happens is they seem to sort of move through their life cycle before the end of the actual growing season. And so what happens is you're planting twice. So you're putting in, if you're in protected culture, beginning of April, end of March, we see, and then by the middle of our summer months here in Southwest Missouri, you're putting in a fall planting of tomatoes because those are spent. They're going to be ate up with diseases. They're going to be, by then insect issues. And if there's anything not right with the soil, it will come out. And you'll experience that with your plants. When you talk about grafted plants, however, what we found is that you can plant once, and then that initial planting can go all the way until a freezing point in the fall. And so rather than doing all the work of planting, training, harvesting, then clearing out your tunnel, and then doing it all again. That's just one time with grafted plants.
Well, Shon, you've been doing this for a while now, so can you give us some tips for being successful with grafted tomato plants?
Yes, certainly. So if it can be done wrong, we did it. And so there are several things that we've sort of identified as, if you can have this down, I think you're going to be more successful in being able to have a product that's available when it should be and happy customers on the back end. In regards to grafting at scale or commercial production, one of the tools that is essential for your success that you're going to need to think about is a seed house or a greenhouse, a place where you can control heat, humidity, and moisture to a relatively accurate degree. This will help us to heal the plants after they come out of the healing chamber, but also to start them and have them consistent in terms of height and diameter of stem as we move forward. And that allows us to have a readily available supply of plants being consistent for our customers on the back end.
Well, scheduling can certainly be an important part of grafting your own tomato plants. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One of the things that we've found with success with grafted tomatoes is indeed scheduling. We tried very hard to be fancy with scheduling. We went through Microsoft Excel forms. We tried to make Google worksheets. We tried to put things on the iPad so that we could carry it to the field with us or to the seed houses. It just didn't work. And so what we have decided to do, and at least for the time being, this is what we're sticking with, is we went to the grocery store and we bought us a good old-fashioned desk calendar. And so what happens and what we found is once a customer places an order with us, we ask for the target date. When do you actually want these tomatoes? And then we put that on the calendar and we count backwards in time 10 weeks. And that is the day that we're going to start those particular seeds, rootstock and scion. That keeps us on track. It ensures that we have that consistent and quality plant that we want at the end when it's actually needed. Each customer gets their own date. Sometimes there are multiple customers that come out on the same date, but that's just fine. It's just more seeding that particular day. But it really keeps you on track and then helps you to keep records with who gets what and when. You're going to need something like that if you're going to be successful in grafting plants.
Well, Shon, I always tell clients it starts with the soil. To have a healthy plant, you have to start with healthy soil.
Sure.
So can you tell us about the growing media you use for these grafted plants?
Sure, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
What we found is that it's a little bit different for grafted than it is for traditional production, just growing plants out. The reason why is because at least the rootstock portion of the particular grafted plant that you're selling, it stays in that cell for a long time, up to 10 weeks. Wow. And so it's going to need a little bit extra nutrients. And so we use a soilless mix from Johnny's that has micro and macronutrients in it. And it's more expensive, but the plants are going to be much happier in the end. And so if you're looking about and you're thinking about budgets, you don't necessarily need to do that for every plant, meaning the scions and the rootstocks. But certainly the rootstocks, it does pay to go that extra mile and get as high a quality as you can afford to put them into, because they're going to be in there a long time and they need help as you go throughout the season.
Well, time management is certainly important. We want the scion to be the same diameter as the rootstock, and getting those to match up can be a little bit of a challenge. So what are some things that you've done to work with that?
So this is one of the golden nuggets that sort of came out of the work that we've done with this grant. There's a lot of resources that are available for grafting. There's a lot of good videos on YouTube from various trusted sources. We really haven't heard too much about management of plant growth. And what we're talking about there is the rootstocks and the scions grow at different rates. And also you're going to find, regardless of where you get your seed, there's going to be different rates of growth within, even if you have a 50 cell insert, within those 50 plants. You're going to have some that are smaller, you're going to have some that are larger. So what do you do with that? Well, 2 tips. First, if it's an entire flat, say a 50 cell flat, you can take that and you can actually move it into a cooler area. And so nighttime temperatures is what seems to be important to slow that growth rate. 52 to 54 degrees is sort of that target area, and that won't damage the actual plant, but it will slow it down. Secondly, if you have variability within the flat itself, you can actually trim some of the true leaves away. You can remove so much of that, and that will slow that growth rate. Hopefully enough, the rest of the plants can catch up. And when you do go in for grafting time, hopefully you're all relatively similar in that diameter, because they can heal a whole lot easier and quicker across the board if you can achieve that. Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about seedlings, humidity can certainly be a big part of that. So what are some things that you've done to manage humidity, or what are some tips you could give on humidity?
So this is another one of those golden nuggets. Again, there's a lot of resources about grafting. They all tend to focus on the actual graft itself. And so you have somebody with a video setup, and you have your flat of the rootstocks, and then right beside it you have your scions, and it shows you putting on the tubes, and it shows you putting on this. And that's very important. It takes several units before you're proficient at that. It does take practice. However, management of healing chambers, and specifically the humidity there, that seems to be one of the most critical parts to being successful in offering grafted plants for yourself and for sale to others. So what we do is we have a 7 to 10 day process, and it is that variable. It depends upon cloud cover outside. It depends upon the humidity of the atmosphere at the time. What we do is day 1 through 5-ish, we keep it 95 to 99% humidity within the healing chamber. After that, we begin to drop that down to 90, to 80, to 70, and this might be in half-day steps, it might be in a full 24 hours, and we're watching those plants for wilting. We get nervous, and we'll start to turn that back up once you see a plant actually begin to lay over and look like a shepherd's crook. That's what we call it on the farm, as though they're shepherd's crooking, and that means turn the humidity back up. Okay. So what happens is, once you start to withdraw that humidity from that, it might take multiple times of going up and going down before they begin to act, to behave like they're ready for the lower level and a lower level. And so pretty soon, day 7, day 8, you're actually opening up that tent, and you're exposing those grafted plants to the environment itself. It's this time, it's really critical that you're there to check those plants. How are they doing? At least every couple of hours. How are they looking? And then making those management decisions of, we need to button this back up, higher humidity, or we're doing okay. Let's keep going with where we're at. Managing that humidity inside the healing chamber is paramount. It is so important to being able to have actual plants for use and for sale on the back end of this. Yeah. One of the most important pieces of equipment that you are going to need, regardless of the scale, regardless of your size, for grafting is our healing chamber. These can be very inexpensive. It can be built usually by sourcing local materials from a hardware store, but it is a critical component in the success of grafted plants. We have 3 here at our operation because we're more on the commercial scale end of things. This allows us to have a 7 to 10 day window for healing before opening the plastic up and eventually taking these plants out and putting them in the greenhouse to harden off and to continue to grow, ready for the consumer at the end. One of the things that you're going to notice as you move through the video series available for free on YouTube and other particular sites is everybody focuses on the actual grafting, that is the cutting. The scion, being joined to the rootstock underneath it. What we have found is that the management of your healing chamber actually is paramount, if not the most important piece to success in grafting. What we're thinking about in terms of grafting is a 7-day healing cycle. So the first 5 days, we're going to keep the humidity at around 95 to 99%. From that particular point, we're going to begin to lower it to 80% at day 6. We're going to check the plants and see how they're doing. If they're wilted or they appear stressed, we need to then increase the humidity back to the original level, wait, and then try it again. And that process will be repeated until eventually we can actually open the tent and expose the plants to the atmosphere that's around us, and they'll be fine. They'll start to grow from that point. Because of our scale, we have 3 separate bays set up. For each healing chamber, we use a cool mist humidifier with an 1.5-inch PVC pipe that comes out of the top and goes into the chamber itself. We have holes drilled along this particular pipe, and it simply lets the humidity fall into the healing chamber, holding it at a very high level, and that's what's needed to be successful. Additionally, one of the things that you're going to need to think about when you're grafting plants is to have a designated space. Usually we suggest concrete floors or a gravel floor where moisture can leave the particular area. When you are healing plants, regardless of your efforts, these chambers fill up with water. If that spills onto the floor and it is in your home, on carpet or on hardwood or something like that, it will ruin those floors. And so to have a designated space that has the ability to be able to withstand water on it is essential. Also, it must be controlled in terms of temperature. It cannot freeze in here. And for commercial producers, you're coming into this particular space at the beginning of February to graft. So you will need additional heat as you move further into that spring season. One of the objectives of the grant that we were given from the Missouri Department of Agriculture was looking at 2 distinct setups for grafting. One had the more serious grower in mind, grafting for themselves. The other, a more commercial scale in mind. What we found essentially is that the upfront costs for both are extremely similar. And for the homeowner, you're going to have just as much time invested, specifically at the end of the healing process, as the commercial scale does. And so it might not be economic for you to graft your own if you have readily available plants in your area that's already being grafted by somebody else.
Well, through this process, I know you and I have both learned a lot. We've had successes, we've had failures, and it takes a lot of patience. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's perfectly said.
Yeah.
So what happened with us, and this is what I would recommend that you do. I took an entire season from the end of February until the middle or the end of May, and I grafted. Not for sale, not for anybody else. I bought cheap seed and didn't use the best products because that would have been expensive. Mm-hmm. And I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And a lot of tomatoes were harmed in the making of this grant. But from that, we become relatively proficient at it. So that's what I would recommend. First, take a step back, try this yourself. Try it if you're going to be doing it commercially at scale. Can you keep up? Can you do this? And give yourself that season where you don't expect anything. That's going to give you the confidence needed to begin to talk to farmers and to begin to take those orders. Be patient. Above all, with grafting, be patient. It has a built-in humility switch. You will do so well on one particular batch, and you'll feel like $1 million. Mm-hmm. And then the next batch, 80% of them will die. There's not really any rhyme or reason for that, but that will happen less often as you get more and more experience. So just be patient and have fun with it.
Well, Shon, to close us out, closing thoughts, a business plan is very important. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Agriculture is a business. It's very important that we sit down and we think about what we're expecting for a return on investment. When will this pay us back when we include all of our upfront costs? Am I willing or able to put in the time necessary? And grafting takes quite a bit. Also, from marketing, is this something that is needed in my area? How close am I to farmers that grow and sell commercially? Because that's going to be one of my target audiences. Have I done anything like a marketing plan? All of those pieces are extremely important and something that you need to have in mind as you begin to think about adding this to your operation. Certainly.
Okay, very good. Well, if someone's interested in coming up with a business plan, they can reach out to University of Missouri Extension. We have people that can help. And we're also going to have help on the Webb City Farmers Market website. We're going to have information about this project, tip sheets, financial information, all that kind of good stuff. And we also want to thank the Missouri Department of Agriculture for funding for helping us do this project. So thank you, Shon Bishop, Bishop's Gardens, Cassville, Missouri. I'm Kelly McGowan, Field Specialist in Horticulture with University of Missouri Extension.